Just talk to us a little bit about some of the impact of these Magnificent Seven. The impact that Apple had is 50% run up in 2023. And then on the day, of course, people starting to think that they can really continue to outperform. That seems to be questioned.
Hi, Caroline. Happy New Year to you. Yes, with Apple, it's probably our least favorite among the Magnificent Seven. Tech overall was up 56% as a sector within the S&P 500 in 2023. So starting off 2024 with a little bit of a breather, not a big surprise here. And then with Apple, as Barclays mentioned in their downgrade, the slowing of their overall hardware sales is going to be a problem. And, the one thing that keeps the stock up was all the buybacks. But, when the multiple is closer to 30 times, it's just less attractive sort of on a, going forward basis here.
How much does the reaction in Apple signify a broader concern that all of the fantastic growth in equities in the tech sector we saw in 2023 is not going to carry through to 2024?
Hi, Ed. Yes, reversals tend to happen in January. We all love to hear about the dogs of the Dow and how they tend to perform better in January. And so, we do see a little bit of profit taking clearly going on today in many of these Magnificent Seven names. We like technology from a long-term perspective. I think a lot of these names have a lot of growth in them over the long term. However, in the short term, profit taking happens. It's good to lock in some of those great returns that we saw in 2023 and pay those taxes in 2025.
In order to realize some of those returns last year, you needed to buy 7 names, the Magnificent Seven. How will that be different in 2024? There were so many unique stories within those 7. Nvidia was a really clear AI story on the compute side. Can it just continue on, or do you have to go very specific? Forget the bundle of 7. The Magnificent One is what you got to go down.
Well, Nvidia was definitely a leader within that Magnificent Seven, up over 239%, I believe, in 2023. Will that repeat? Not likely. And we have to remember that in 2022, Nvidia was down over 50%. And so that, great growth that we saw in 2023 was after a significant decline. Longer term, we continue to like Nvidia and, what they are doing. They continue to grow their total addressable market with, starting with gaming, leading into machine learning, and then going on to the data center and AI. And so we continue to like that. We just don't think that it's going to have the type of returns that we experienced in 2023. And diversification really wasn't your friend in 2023. But I think going into 2024, we believe that a broadening of the overall market is what's going to benefit investors.
So talk about that broadening, Ayako. Do you go broader within the US? Do you go for smaller market capitalizations, or do you go global?
I think you go all of it. We saw at the end of 2023, small caps had a significant comeback in November and December, having, I think December small caps are up over 12%. And so, having that diversification really helps out. And then, I know we talked about the dollar sort of rebounding, at least recently, but, dollar weakness does help out international and emerging market stocks. So we expect some of that broadening to benefit overall investors, especially as interest rates, come down, or at least if that's the expectation.
So you said how perhaps Apple was, the least favored among some of those key names. Which one is your star performer? Which name do you have to hold on to with both hands?
We really like Microsoft. I think here it's a broad, again, diversified name. They've got so many areas of growth. They continue to grow within cloud. They do have the partnership with OpenAI in regards to artificial intelligence. And so we like all of that. They continue to grow, Outlook in Microsoft 360. They have Copilot, which launched in November, which will introduce more AI capabilities across all of the Microsoft platform. And so we continue to like Microsoft over the long term.